There are places where the past refuses to die, where the memories of the forgotten claw their way into the present. Sarah Mitchell thought she was simply moving into a new apartment, but what she discovered in the abandoned attic was something that never should have been found, a secret that had been buried for generations. And now something is watching, waiting, and it's far too late for her to leave. Sarah Mitchell had always dreamed of moving into an old apartment. She loved the character of ancient buildings, the creaking floors, the musty smell of old wood, and the feeling that something more than just bricks and mortar had lived there. So when she found a small flat in a rundown Victorian building in the heart of the city, it felt like a dream come true. The landlord, an elderly man with tired eyes, had warned her not to bother the attic. "Just leave it be," he'd said with a voice thick with caution. "Nothing up there but dust and memories best left alone." But Sarah, eager to explore, paid it no mind. The idea of a forgotten space above her apartment sparked her curiosity. After all, what harm could a few forgotten boxes do? The first few days in the apartment were uneventful. The space was small but cozy, with sunlight streaming through the dusty windows, casting golden beams across the furniture. But as the days wore on, something began to feel off. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, and at night, Sarah would hear the sound of footsteps above her, slow and deliberate, echoing from the attic. One evening, the noise was louder than usual, so she decided to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, she made her way up to the attic door. The handle was cold in her hand as she turned it. The door creaked open with an eerie groan, revealing nothing but shadows and thick dust. She stepped inside, and immediately the air grew colder, as if the space had been frozen in time. Her breath clouded in front of her as she scanned the room. Shelves lined the walls, piled high with old boxes, broken furniture, and forgotten relics of the past. Then, something caught her eye. At the far corner of the attic, hidden beneath a dusty tarp, was an old chair. But it wasn't just any chair, it was a high-backed, ornate piece with intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. As she approached it, she noticed something odd about the chair. There was a dark stain on the seat, like a shadow that didn't belong. And on the backrest, the faint outline of a handprint, as though someone had been sitting there just moments before. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The sound was faint, but it sent a jolt of fear through her. She spun around, but there was nothing behind her. No movement, no one there. The silence felt heavier now, thick. Her heart raced. She felt drawn back to the chair, compelled to touch it. Her hand reached out slowly, trembling. Just as her fingers brushed the fabric, the door behind her slammed shut. She jumped back, gasping for air, but the darkness around her seemed to close in. Then she heard it. A whisper, faint but clear. "You shouldn't have come up here." Her breath caught in her throat. She spun around, shining the flashlight wildly through the room. There was no one, but the air felt heavier, thicker. Something was watching her, something that shouldn't have been there. Suddenly the chair creaked. Sarah froze. Her gaze was locked on the seat as it shifted ever so slightly, as if someone had just sat down. The air grew colder still, and she could see her breath misting in front of her face. "You woke it up," came the whisper again, louder this time, closer. "It's been waiting for you." The room seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the shadows stretching unnaturally toward her. The flashlight flickered and died in her hand, plunging the attic into an oppressive darkness. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she backed toward the door, but the moment she reached for the handle, the whispering grew into a growl. Something was moving, something fast, scraping across the floor. Thud, thud, thud. The footsteps came toward her. Panicked, she tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. She screamed and pushed with all her strength, but the door stayed firmly shut. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. Then, just as she was about to lose hope, a cold, skeletal hand shot out from the shadows, grabbing her wrist with an iron grip. Her blood ran cold. A figure materialized from the darkness, a gaunt figure, covered in tattered clothing, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly. It pulled itself from the shadows, its limbs too long, too twisted, moving like something not quite human. "You should have listened," the figure whispered, its voice a rasping, gurgling sound that clawed at her mind. "You were never meant to be here." She tried to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat. The thing's grip tightened, dragging her backward toward the chair in the corner. She fought, kicking and clawing at the floor, but the darkness was too strong. It was everywhere. It was in her mind, in her soul, suffocating her. Then, just as the figure loomed over her, ready to drag her into the chair, the door burst open. A rush of light flooded the room, blinding her. The figure hissed, recoiling from the light. And in that instant, Sarah wrenched herself free. She stumbled backward, gasping for air, her heart hammering in her chest. The light from the open door illuminated the room. The chair, the handprint, the creeping darkness, everything was gone. It was as if nothing had ever happened. But Sarah knew better. She had seen it. She had felt it. The figure was still there, watching, and it would never leave. The next day, Sarah packed her bags, trembling. She couldn't stay in the apartment any longer, but when she reached the door to leave, she froze. The door to the attic was wide open, and on the chair in the corner, the dark stain had returned. But this time, there was something else, a shadow just beneath the chair, as though someone or something was waiting for her. The whispers started again, soft, persistent. "Come back to us." And in that moment, Sarah realized the house wasn't haunted. It was a trap, and it had no intention of letting her go.